Hi everyone, welcome to our bird reproduction and behavior video. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to explain the cues that trigger breeding in birds, the different breeding systems of birds, the process of copulation and fertilization in birds, the adaptive advantage of Leking and brood parasitism. You'll be able to differentiate the adaptive advantage of differing clutch size and incubation period among different bird species, and differentiate precocial and altricial hatchlings. So timing of reproduction is triggered by photoperiod. So the increasing day length in late winter leads to hormonal changes, and the molting occurs, the nuptial plumage comes in, courtship behavior happens, breeding, migration, all follows. So this is kind of a neat timeline that shows what happens in changes in plumage, changes in migration through the course of the year for one species. There's two general breeding systems seen in birds. Most birds are monogamous, where there's one male and one female, and they share parental care. Polygamy also happens in birds, but just in about 3% of birds, where there's multiple mates of the opposite sex. And there's some different ways for polygamy to happen. There's polygyny, where there's one male and multiple females. About 2% of birds exhibit this, examples being red-winged blackbirds and indigo buntings. Polyandry is when there's one female and multiple males, and this only occurs in less than 1% of birds. There are some sandpipers and some rails that exhibit polyandry. Polygynandry, so several males and several females forming a breeding unit, that is seen in ostriches, rheas, and emus. Leking, maybe you've heard the term lek before, especially in relation to wild turkeys. A lek is an area for male courtship, display, and mating. And so all the males come together, and then the females pass through and choose a mate. So you ask why, what's the adaptive advantage of this? And there's still some uncertainty about the specific adaptive advantage, but there's some different hypotheses. So leks are a hot spot where females will gather. So if to draw in the females, all the males gather, females are drawn in. So the males gather around, and the more experienced and attractive males are the ones that generally get the attention from the females, but if you're a little less attractive, less experienced, and are hanging out around there, there's a chance that something might happen, right? The advantage for females is they get to see all of their choices in one place instead of having to travel to find different males. And research has shown that within a lek, the males in the lek have a high level of kinship. So they're highly related. So there's brothers and dads and uncles and sons. And so even if one of the males doesn't mate, there's a high chance that those related to him have mated, and there's that idea of inclusive fitness. So there's an adaptive advantage even for those that don't get to mate. So most birds lack external genitalia that would get in the way for flight. And so the way that copulation and fertilization happens is called the cloacal kiss. So basically birds touch cloaca, sperm is transferred from the male to the female. It lasts just a few seconds, and it sometimes even happens in midair. So for some species, it happens on the ground. For others, you can find videos of hawks where they kind of come together, their raptors like grab onto each other. Sometimes they spin in like a spiral midair, very dramatic, but short, cloacal kiss. Females of many bird species can store sperm in tubules inside their body. Sometimes they'll even store the sperm while they migrate, and fertilization doesn't happen until after migration. So when a female has mated with multiple males, and that's usually the case. It's often, it's when a female mates with multiple males, usually the sperm actually compete, and typically the last sperm deposited is the one that actually fertilizes the egg. You may have heard of brood parasitism before, and that's when one individual, a female, lays eggs in another female's nest. This can happen both intraspecifically and interspecifically. The adaptive advantage here is to maintain a nest, to sit on the eggs and incubate them until hatching takes a lot of energy. So if you know that somebody else has already got a nest and is incubating those eggs, just lay eggs in that nest. You know they're well taken care of. You know they're going to be fine, or there's a good chance, and you don't have to expend the energy yourself. So that's the adaptive advantage. Without expending energy to take care of eggs, the eggs are taken care of. So intraspecific brood parasitism means within the same species. So within a species, if a female, sometimes it might be a female can't find a nest site, a female, there could be some metabolic trigger to indicate I don't have enough energy to incubate these eggs. So some waterfowl like coots, some pigeons, doves, starlings will sometimes do brood parasitism where they lay eggs in another individual of their own species nest. There's also interspecific brood parasitism, and in this case, it's usually obligate brood parasites. So these are species that have to lay eggs in another species nest. They don't ever make their own nest. And the cowbird is kind of the classic example of this. This is a cowbird egg, so 3 cowbird eggs in a warbler nest. So they don't even look the same, but the warbler doesn't seem to mind. The warbler will still incubate all of these eggs and even take care of the young. It allows the cowbirds both to lay more eggs. So if you're not putting the energy into the incubation of the eggs, you can lay more and not spend energy on caring for the eggs or caring for the young. There's a pretty wide range in clutch size among birds, so anywhere between 1 and 18 eggs per clutch. Vultures are on the low end, wild turkey are on the high end. Most birds are the average is like 3 to 5 eggs per clutch across all birds. For wild turkey, the average is usually about 12. And that can vary even within species based on the location, habitat, the body size. Lots of different factors can influence it. So that's why there's typically a range. Incubation is what birds do to keep the temperature of eggs relatively stable, and that increases the hatching success. So it's basically when a bird sits on the eggs to transfer some of that homeothermic energy that they're making in their body, to transfer it to the eggs to keep them warm. There, again, is a big range of where nests are, how incubation happens. This is a killdeer nest. They usually make their nests in rocks. It's kind of crazy. Look at how they can be really, really camouflaged. Others obviously are up in trees, sitting in nests made of sticks and things. The incubation period, the amount of time between hatching, between the eggs being laid and them hatching, again, wide range. So for some woodpeckers and small songbirds, it's as short as 10 days from laying the eggs to hatching the eggs. For others, examples being albatross and kiwi, it can be up to 90 days. And that relates to the hatchlings being either altricial or precocial, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to point out the brood patch. We mentioned this in an earlier video. This is a brood patch. It's a place of, it's a apteria. Remember, that's a place without Feathers. Sometimes some species have this brood patch exposed all the time. For some, the feathers in that area fall out at incubation time, but it's a bare spot, and it's a highly vascularized bare spot. So lots of blood is going to that spot. There's not the feathers in the way. So the nice warm skin lays right up against the eggs and incubates them. So now baby bird hatchlings. How adorable, huh? They can be either precocial or altricial. So precocial hatchlings leave the nest immediately. They follow their parents. They can pick up their own food. They might be brought to food by a parent, but they can get their own food into their mouths. Examples are ducks, shorebirds, grouse, quail. This you typically see in birds near water, where the nests are near water. Maybe when nests are on the ground. So to have hatchlings exposed and not able to fend for themselves in these areas would leave them much more susceptible to predators. Altricial hatchlings, on the other end of the spectrum, are born blind, naked, helpless at hatching. Examples here are songbirds, woodpeckers, hummingbirds, swifts, pigeons, kingfishers. So everybody has seen at least pictures of little hatchlings like this, like so pathetically helpless, no feathers. Their eyes aren't even open. All they can do really is open their mouth, say, feed me. So they need lots and lots of care. Both of these have adaptive advantages, right? For this, there's less time to them, less time inside the egg. And if they're in a protected nest, that works just fine. So go back, make sure you can explain the cues that trigger breeding. You can describe breeding systems, copulation and fertilization, Leking, brood parasitism, different clutch sizes, and then differentiate precocial and altricial hatchlings. Leaving you with a joke today. What's orange and sounds like a parrot? A carrot. All right, guys, thanks for watching. See you in class.